Okay, y'all. Hello, 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 hello. Let's get it in. I'm taking a break from running errands and doing my garage, and I figured I'd sit down here while I had a moment I needed a break. Ooh, I've been working. But let's get it in. Today's Shabbat study. Happy Shabbat is on Nehemiah 2. We're going to go from, like last week, we were talking about Nehemiah 1, which we were talking about refocus. We got to get back refocused as a recap. We got to, put our mind back on God, start seeking Him again, putting Him back in the equation. We've been leaning to our own understanding because we've been through some things and we've seen some things that we never saw before. The pandemic and everything, it's like we've been spiraling out of control. But God is still on the throne. He's still worthy. He's still powerful. He's still the Alpha and the Omega. This wasn't a surprise to Him. He knew all that was coming, and He has all of us in His hand. So we need to put our faith and our trust back in Him. That's what we need to get refocused. That's a recap of last week's message, Nehemiah 1. If you haven't, go back and listen to it and you can be able to catch up. But this week, we're going to be in Nehemiah 2, and we're going to be talking about being strategic. After you get back with God and get refocused, it's got prayer in there, talking to God, and that's another thing I want to say. People always talking about, well, what happened to prayer? We didn't pray about stuff. Or, what happened? If you praying without ceasing, you don't have to pick a time to just pray. That's a nugget for somebody. If you walk in a lifestyle of prayer, you don't have to stop and think, I need to pray. If you're constantly praying, what you going to do? Stop and say, oh, I need to pray some more? No. If you pray without ceasing, that means to have a lifestyle of prayer. That is having a lifestyle where you are constantly talking to God, where God is constantly in your ear. Not just when you need Him, not just when you calling on Him for something, when you want something. If you're constantly talking to God, just like you talk to your boo on the phone, or like you talk to your best BFF, or like you talk to somebody on the phone, you gossiping. You always gonna make sure you're gonna be, girl, let me tell you this. You see what, you always gonna be in constant communication with those that you don't want to talk to. But when we want to talk to God, we gotta set a time. No. Praying without ceasing is being in constant communication with God. It's walking with God in the cool of the day. It's having a personal relationship with Him to where you are constantly aware of Him. And if you are always constantly aware of Him, then you ain't got no room to be sinning or doing anything that is against Him, or mocking Him, or doing anything that's displeasing to Him, doing anything that's going to get, for the wages of sin is death. You ain't got time to be doing nothing like that. Because if you in constant communication with God, you would not feel comfortable to do anything that goes against Him. Not just trying to look like you saved. Not just trying to look like you so holier than thou. Not just trying to act like stand up there with all these words and praying like you be having a relationship with God. You can tell who got a relationship with God. You can tell who prays and just try to pray so eloquently and so long to try to convince somebody, but really they trying to convince themselves that they have a relationship with God. But that's what I'm saying. When you pray without ceasing, you are in constant communication with God. Like the children, some of us grew up with imaginary friends. That's what taught me. Having these imaginary friends. We grow up, the ones that, wasn't all hanging out in the social club and being with the other ones that was getting into trouble and everything. We had our own imaginary friends. My imaginary friend just happened to be God. I wasn't doing and praying without ceasing until I grew and learned, and this is real, until I began to study Him and do everything that the word said, and I began to grow in Him. Then I began to say, this thing is real. This is truth in it, or whatever. But there's a movie called Bogus. if you can get a hold of that movie, library, I don't know, maybe it's online somewhere, watch that movie and look at it from a spiritual perspective, where Bogus is the imaginary person. Put God there. Look at it from that perspective. And that's how we supposed to be. That's how we supposed to, like our imaginary friend. But God is not imaginary. God is real. He's the imaginary friend that can manifest. He's real. He's the spirit that is real. Just because you can't see him in the flesh anymore, until you see him walking or working through somebody who has him, that's how you still see. That's why I said we can't see God. If you are around true believers that truly got God and not faking the funk, you can see God. Preacher's Wife, that movie said, we are the faces of God. Those of us that carry him. Those of us that are, doing what we supposed to do, having a relationship with him, not just trying to convince somebody else that we got this relationship with him. If we got a relationship with him, our lifestyle is increasing. He's sustaining us. He's protecting us. We ain't going through all manner of hell and evil all the time, because he's protection all around us. He rebukes the devourer. So if the devourer is always coming, then either God is trying to teach you something, show you something, you done lost him, or you ain't got him. God say, I will never leave you or forsake you. But that don't mean we don't walk away from him. We can be leaning to our own understanding, get so comfortable in this thing. We got God. We do it in our own flesh. Some of us get so good and eloquent in our gifts to where we think it's us, and we forget that it's the Spirit of God. So just because it still goes because it's the gift, but if it ain't God's stamp behind it, it's not going to sustain. So what I'm saying is, sometimes we can be so holier than thou, and we know earthly good. Because we step out of God. We step away from God. And we begin to think we doing it ourselves. So we begin to lean to our own understanding. And then those are the ones that talk about, well, what happened to prayer? What happened to, praying about things? Well, I thought you had a relationship with God. That means you praying all the time to him. You talking all the time to him. You're communicating all the time to him. And when you communicate verbally, that 20% verbal, the 80% communication, that it shows out in your body language, that 80% communication. But if I see you doing one thing, saying one thing over here, but I see you doing something else, you really don't have a relationship with God. You really ain't been praying without ceasing. If I see you comfortable to go do some type of sin or whatever sin it is, then that means you ain't been praying without ceasing. You're not comfortable doing it. I mean, people look at me and they say, who she thinks she is, because I strive to be with God. I strive to do the right thing. And, because I do that, people don't like, well, I don't know who she thinks she is or whatever. I strive to be an ambassador for Christ, the best ambassador I can. I strive not to go off on people and take their head off. That's why I put my Baptist finger up and step away. I shake the dust or whatever. I strive to carry the character of God. I strive to show that God is real, that this thing is real, that I have it and you can have it too. So that's why a lot of people don't, I don't know why God got me on this rant, but that's why a lot of people don't believe, because they don't see truth in a lot of people. They don't see truth in the ones that say they got God, or the believers of God. Those people got to get refocused. Those people got to visit last week's message and learn to get refocused. Learn to communicate. Learn to get, God back in their situation, back in them. Learn to start leaning to God instead of their own understanding. They need to, start talking to him. Let him clean them up. Let them go through and learn about God all over again, because sometimes, we get it twisted. Sometimes we be going on about our way and we think we really doing God a great service, but what we doing is we doing a great disservice. So, like I say, this week message, we're going to talk about being strategic. in God, taking what God told us and being strategic. After we refocused and put him in the forefront as the head of the ship, the captain of the ship, we need to take the orders or the instructions or whatever that he gave us and how to be strategic. Verse 1 says, and it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of, now y'all can know I can't say all these names, so I'm probably going to obliterate them. But Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. This is Nehemiah talking. It's in his first language. He wrote the book. A lot of people believe that he wrote the book. So he's talking in his first language, and he's saying that the king was having a merry time. Wine was before him. Nehemiah last week, we know he talked to God. He got a plan. He got refocused. He prayed with God. He asked God some things, and God gave him the answer, gave him the instructions or whatever. And now Nehemiah is becoming strategic. He's in a place and he sees in the moment. He's being strategic by looking at the atmosphere, seeing how he can be strategic in the atmosphere. Right here it says the wine was before him. That don't mean the king was drinking. That means just the wine was before him. So while the wine was before him, Nehemiah took the wine and he began to give it to him, because he knew that the more the king, felt comfortable, felt pleasure, felt good, that maybe when he asked this question, he was going to be more apt to say yes. So he set the king up is what he did. He was the cupbearer. All he was supposed to do was drink, or whatever came to the king first. He was supposed to test it to make sure it was worthy to get to the king and it didn't kill the king. If he was to drink wine and it had poison in it, then the king would die. But he was supposed to take it first, so that if he died, then the king knew it wasn't. It was, then the king would have to find another cupbearer. But so he saw the wine and he took it and he gave it to the king. So he was preparing him. Meanwhile, he was in his emotion. He was in his feelings. He wasn't trying to act professional. He wasn't trying to, just do his job. But he allowed the king to see some emotion, to see some things that he was going through, see that something was on his mind. And he knew, I'm sure, working with the king and that close, he knew that the king had a heart. He knew that the king would cared for people and would ask or whatever. So he said, I had not been before time sad in his presence. So instead of going there with a fixed face, a professional face on or anything, he had went there with a sad face. He showed some emotion or whatever. Verse 2, wherefore the king said unto me, why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of the heart. Then I was very sore afraid. So the king asked, why you sad? You ain't sick or nothing. You didn't drink nothing that made you sick. Why are you walking around sad? Basically. So, and Nehemiah told him it's nothing but sorrow of the heart, means that his heart was broken. And he was sore afraid because he told the king that his heart was broken. We talk about stuff having a communication or a conversation with the king that he had never had before. So this is the reason why he was afraid, because when you are serving a leader, sometimes you are afraid to be emotional. Sometimes you are afraid to show your human side. People look at Jesus and they look at him as Lord and Savior, but they forget that he walked his flesh on the earth. So therefore he had emotions. He turned over tables. That means he showed anger. He was heartbroken when Lazarus was dead. He didn't weep because, Lazarus was dead. He knew he could raise him, but he wept because the people wasn't believing. He was the reconciliation, and the people hadn't caught on yet. So that's the reason why he showed emotion amongst the people. And sometimes when a leader shows emotion, the people look at them like they less than, or they can't handle something. A leader can't cry. A leader can't mess up. A leader can't make a mistake. Because if they do make a mistake, then the congregation or the people that's following that leader think that that leader can't take care of them. We got it backwards. God, everything we were made in the image of God. Everything that we have, God has. He gave it to us. Therefore, if we can be emotional, God can be emotional. You know, God, he gets angry. God, he weeps. God, he's the image of, we're the image of him. So whatever we have coming out of us, you know it first came from God. So leaders aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes. You know, we got to pray for our leaders because they are human. They're in flesh too. And ain't nothing good in this flesh. You know, this flesh is sin bound. You know, it's going to constantly, you know, pull us back down to the earth from which it came. But our spirit is in the image of God. Our spirit is willing. Our spirit is what matches up with God. So we need to be careful of our spirit. So if our spirit is causing our flesh to weep, it shouldn't make people afraid because they act like they don't have no emotions. God gave us emotions to gauge what we're feeling. It's an expression of what's going on the inside of in our spirit. So we shouldn't be afraid not to be emotional. We just shouldn't live in our emotions. We shouldn't govern our lifestyle by our emotions. So our emotions should be governed by us. You know, there's a time and a season for everything. You know, there are going to be times when we need to mourn to get some of that weight, that heaviness off of us. And then after you cry, you feel better. You know, you can have a clearer mind. You're able to do things. So just run around taking on the cares of the world upon you and never having any type of release. That's how some mental illness start. You know, you start to lose your mind because pressure busts a pipe and it starts to break. You know, you can only take so much. God will only put on us he will not put on us more than we can bear. But we have a tendency to put on us more than we can bear. We go out there and do things and take on projects that wasn't meant for us, or we take on projects and never release another previous project. So God won't put it on us, but that don't mean we won't in our own free will go out there and put it on us ourselves. So Nehemiah is showing some emotion to the king, and he's afraid that, you know, the king is going to look down on him. You know, because, you know, you crying and you my cupbearer. You know, how's that to be? He was afraid of that. So verse 3 says, and to say unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? He just let the king know, look, my heritage, my people, from which I came from, you know, the king ain't got no reason not to be sad. You know, he's sitting up, you know, glorious and, you know, in pleasure, and he, you know, people listen to him and, you know, all of that. But his people, he talking about his people, was sitting up and living in waste and ruins and everything. And the gates had been, you know, it ain't got no borders, and people just come and go and do what they want to do. It ain't got no security, nothing no more. So he just went on and told him what was going on with him. And verse 4 says, then the king said unto me, for what dost thou make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. So he prayed right then and there. He prayed to God again. Because I know in the chapter 1, he was talking about he was praying. So he prayed to God again. And God gave him the answer. That's what I'm saying. When you praying without ceasing, you ain't got to wait no whole week, a month, or a year, or whatever. If you're in constant communication with God, God will be in constant communication with you. So Nehemiah was able to pray right then and there in the midst of that conversation, and God gave him the answer. Do you have a relationship with God like that? Can you pray and God speak to you? I mean, is your heart so humble and so with God to where, you know, you ain't got to work some things out before he answer you? You ain't got to work some things out before you hear him. because God is always speaking. One way, shape, form, or another. He's always going to give you the answer that you need. But your transmitter, is it able in a position to where it can hear or receive the frequency that God is sending? Sometimes it's us and it's not God. We ask a question, but we ain't in position to receive. And then sometimes we looking for the answer in different avenues. And God ain't coming in that avenue. So therefore, because we didn't get it in that avenue, we saying God didn't answer. And God is saying, yeah, I did answer. You just didn't receive. You wasn't humble enough. You wasn't submissive enough or open enough to receive it in the form or the way that I sent it to you. I was asking for some finances or whatever to take care of something. And I was looking for, go out here, do Lyft and all these rides. And if I was getting $3 rides, $5 rides, I'm like, Lord, in this Cadillac, I say, that's barely the gas when you add up enough of them. I was like, what? What's going on here? And then I say, okay, I'm just going to let it go. And then that's when I was able to be open and realize that God sent something else to give me more than what I asked for. So, and I've been stuck on thinking I'm going to go out here and turn my light on and do Lyft and take all these rides and everything, do all this labor, not by might, nor by power, but by his spirit. But I'm thinking I can go out here and do all of this to get the funding that I need for this situation. And I wasn't getting it. Just discouraged me. So I just let it go. God showed me something else. He showed me the way he was coming to give me more than I asked for. So sometimes we got to be open to God instead of trying to think that God has got to be open to us. Sometimes God is trying to do a new thing. Sometimes he's trying to show you that he can come in more ways than one. He got multiple streams of income. He's omnipresent, omniscient. He's everywhere. He's all knowing. You may be looking for him in that one area, and God can show up over here. We just got to pay attention how God is doing it. So that's what I'm saying. We got to pray without ceasing. You got to have a prayer life. Not just one that's standing up in front of people trying to be seen, trying to be shown, or trying to, first, and you got to believe when you pray. If you always just doing that, praying before people, because that shows you really don't believe, because you don't pray when you at home. You don't pray when you in your own secret closet. You don't pray anytime. The only time you pray is just because you're trying to be seen before somebody. You all eloquent with those words. But God, your prayers will tell off on you, because you'll see the blessings of God in your life. People will see the blessings of God in your life. They know you pray because you have a relationship and there's increase all around you. But if you ain't got no increase and you going through hell all the time and you stand up and pray, them prayers may not be getting no higher than the ceiling. You ain't fooling nobody but yourself. And I'm going to beg to differ. You probably ain't even fooling yourself, because you know. So you got to have a prayer life. Prayer is a lifestyle. It's constantly talking to God. It's an armor. Remember? It's one of the armors, the whole armor of God. It's an armor. It's a piece of armor. Communication with God is a piece of armor. So if you don't have that piece of armor on, you don't have the whole armor. Who you trying to fool? Who you trying to convince? That and your lifestyle shows that you just faking. You don't have no prayer life. You don't have God like you say you do. You don't have the increase in your life because you don't have God like you say. In order to get the increase, you got to get to God. God is the increase. So if you're not praying and going to God for the increase, that's the reason why you sitting in drought, in lack. And you sitting there putting your mouth on God. God ain't did this, ain't did that. You ain't believing God. It's not God, it's you. You run around here leaning to your own understanding. trying to take from others, trying to, some leaders or whatever, living off the backs of their people. You know, instead of depending on God, they living off the backs of the people. They living off the people tithes and offering. You know what the people bring in to build up the organization or whatever. You know, Jesus took care of the organization. He didn't pull from the people. The pastor takes care of the organization. I'm just saying. You don't pull from the people, and then when they come asking for a benevolent offering, you turn around and give it back to them like you done something. I'm trying to say, we talk about being strategic today. We got to hear from God, get our instructions from God, and not lean to our own understanding. So anyway, like I said, the king said unto me, for thus thou would make a request. He was asking him, what are you asking me for? And Nehemiah prayed right then and at that moment to talk to God, believing that God was going to give him the answer right there. Not say, well, it's going to come to me. I don't know when, I'm still waiting on it. No. If you are praying without ceasing, you're in conversation, in constant communication with God. Just like I'm talking here, he be talking back to you. Just like you talk when you gossip, you know, it's constant communication. It's back and forth constant communication. It's that still small voice. But some of us is so loud and don't have no peace and full of anxiety to where we can't hear that still small voice. We can't sit down 5 minutes to hear what God got to say. We're not tuned in to the still small voice. We want to hear the big, answer. We listening to our own heartbeat. We want to hear the answer that we want and not the answer that God is giving. So, verse 5 says, and I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. He just put out point blank what he wanted right then and there. What God told him. He want to go to his city, so he may build the city. Send him to Judah. That's what God told him. That was the answer that God gave him right then. And he's asking the king. So, and normally, just like I said the other day with gangbangers, when you asking to leave, that's like signs of disloyalty or whatever. They normally, once you get in the gang, you can't get out of the gang, what they say or whatever. But that's like you are betraying them when you want to get out of the organization or whatever. So he's afraid because he's asking the king, I need to leave my position for a moment. And, that leaves him open because he is the cupbearer until he finds somebody else. Or maybe he got some eyes on somebody else. I don't know. But that leaves him open to harm, hurt, or danger if somebody want to come to him to let him go take care of his family. People, his nation, So he was afraid to ask. Like I said, some of us are afraid to ask our leaders for anything. Some of us are afraid to ask the bosses that we work for, our employers that we work for. But if you realize that you are in the image of God and you deserve just as much as that individual who signs your check does, you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid of no man. As a matter of fact, the scripture says, I think something to the fact that you shouldn't be afraid of, anything that can kill your life. You should be afraid of the one that can kill your spirit. And that's what hell is all about. Hell is about killing your spirit because hell is it's torment. And that type of kill is not a ending. It's a torment. That's a forever type of thing. You gonna wish to die. You gonna want to die. It say the people in hell want ice water. Nothing can quench their thirst. Nothing can quench what they going through or what they're gonna go through. So we got to be able to hear God. We got to be able to like on the radio. The transmit, you turn the knob, it gets different transmitters frequencies. It pulls in different frequencies. Are you on the frequency of God? Are you praying and constantly, without ceasing to be able to hear God? If you're sitting around going through hell, if you're sitting around like you're on your deathbed, you may not be in the will of God. If you're sitting around doing people wrong, sitting around gossiping and talking about people, you may not be in the will of God. Matter of fact, I'm gonna be safe to say you're not in the will of God if you're sitting around talking about people doing people wrong, especially God's people. That's the reason why you are going through whatever you're going through. That's the reason why you have ailments and everything going through your body. You know, he ain't gonna take care of you and disrespect the ones that you are coming against. So, anyway, he asked him to go build the city. Verse 6. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him. See, the queen, the wife was there too. So, this is all being strategic. If he knew that if he wasn't going to get it out the king, he knew with the king's wife sitting there, he was going to get it out of the king's wife because women are emotional. You know, you got to gauge your atmosphere. You know, you just don't pop off and go do something. You got to be strategic. First of all, you got to know that you got a word from God. And God, because if you got a word from God, you know God going to back you up. He going to be in the plan. If you just doing things on your own, then no wonder why the bottom falling out. But you got to be strategic. He didn't only have the heart of the king there. He had to pull on the heart of his wife as well. So the queen also sitting by him, for how long shall thy journey be? And wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. He set him a time. That don't mean that he lied. He just set a time. He told him, 3 days, I believe. We gonna get to it. Told him 3 days. He gave him a time, and the king allowed him to go. I'm getting ahead of myself. It pleased him, and I set him a time. So, number 7, moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come into Judah. That's being more strategic. He knew the adversary or the things that he was going to face going over to Judah. So he was asking him for the letters. He was asking him for the release, for the king's stamp to that, this is proof that the king is allowing him to do all of this. That he got the king's stamp on this. So this being strategic. You can't just pop off and jump off and do something. You have to sit with God and let God tell you what to do. So that's why you can't operate in anxiety. You got to sit and have peace about it. You can't do things just because you want to do it. You got to plan some things. Be strategic. It's time out for us popping off, just doing what we want to do just because we want it done. And then we say, it never worked and it wasn't going to matter. That's because maybe we didn't sit with God long enough. Maybe we didn't follow instruction. Maybe we didn't plan the thing. Some of us is erecting these buildings and these businesses and they falling, but we ain't took time to study our own craft. So therefore, when we come up against adversity, we don't know what to do. We go bankrupt. So you got to be strategic in life. You got to spend time. You got to learn to read. I was talking to a lady I picked up today. Was taking them to the beauty spa. She business administration, and we was talking about, we need to learn to sit and read things. Don't just skim over it. We need to have the patience to read things and be able so that we be in the know. Just not skim over everything and think we got it all and then go out there and do what we want to do. We got to take time to read things. We got to take time to know all of it and not just, want to get enough that we think we can just throw a hook out there and people go bite it and we're going to be successful. No, success takes planning. It takes, some time invested. We can't just go out and do the thing. God tell us something. God said, "Woo, I'm gonna buy you. I'm gonna give you a house." We can't just go out there and start looking for houses and get a house, and we haven't studied and learned how to be a homeowner. We don't know what get into what closing cost is. We don't know about the down payment. We don't know there's down payment assistance programs. We just look at it and say, "Oh, we ain't got enough money," and it's out. That God didn't say that. No, God may give you a seed, and then you need to water. He'll plant a seed in your heart. You need to water, which means you need to learn. You need to educate yourself. You need to cultivate. You need to do all these things for that seed to grow. He may not give you that mansion, but he'll give you the seed to where you can grow and get that mansion later on. That's what we always wanted right now, the microwave society. But we don't even really understand how a microwave works. A microwave cooks from the inside out. So however long it takes to cook the inside of that dish is however long it takes for that dish to be done. If the dish is hard on the inside, it's going to take more than some minutes. If it's not that hard on the inside, it's going to take some seconds. If we pay attention to how the microwave works, it works the same way with us. God got to clean the inside of us. He got to fix some things on the inside of us. He got to teach us some things. And then when we learn the things and we develop, then we're able to receive the blessing that he promised us. We just, it's how bad do you want it? Some of us just get it. We hit something and then we let go. We go off somewhere else. So if you're not prepared for it, you need to get prepared. You need to sit and learn. So God had been preparing me for a position the whole time. But because the people didn't want the position, there ain't nothing I can do about it. But that doesn't mean that everything he prepared me for went to waste. No, God gave me a new vision. He gave me what he really want me to do with it. Because that was just to pass by, type of thing, to be a blessing to some that didn't want the blessing. So they didn't want it. They wanted to do something else. So you can't say God didn't bless you with it. You can't say God didn't give you what you asked for. So, and now God is sent on and gave something else. So we got to be strategic. We got to be loyal. We got to have enough stick and stay to be able to read the whole entire thing. Learn all we can learn. Develop all we can develop. And then let God send us where we need, manifest what we need. So that's what I'm saying. We got to be intentional. We got to be patient. And, I don't know what kind of clock we think we own, but everything is in God's time because he holds eternity. He created time. So he can excel the time or he can make the time, you just go around the Mount Sinai, wasting time or whatever. So let's get back here. He knew about the letters that go beyond. So when he had the letters in his hand, anybody that he came against or that came against him, he could show proof. I got the king's stamp on this. I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm not doing anything that I'm not supposed to be doing. He crossed his eye. He dotted his I's and crossed his T's is what he did. So, verse 8, and a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me. So God was giving him favor with the king. He was asking for the tools and the lumber and stuff that he need for the gates. He was asking him for things that, he needed to do the project that God told him to do. So he didn't lie. He wasn't trying to be hiding or anything. He was asking him while the king was merry, while the king was feeling good. So he was telling him these things, but sometimes we not in our right mind when we doing business. Sometimes in business, like our children. Sometimes they know we tired and don't want to be bothered. And they know, well, if I go ask mama this and she don't want, she just going to say, yeah. And I'm going to get my way. You know, that same way what Nehemiah was doing here. He was feeling good. He was in pleasure, sitting there with his wife, the queen, feeling good. And he was asking him for the tools that he needed to build the gate. So, like I say, God gave him favor. Verse 9 says, then I came to the governors beyond the river and gave them the king's letter. See, he showed them, look, I got permission to be here. I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. You know, the king's staff is behind this. Now, the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. He even sent an entourage with him. People to help him, to cover him, to protect him, to prove that this is the king's stamp, that the king is in favor of this. When you get instruction from God, God will give you everything you need. Even your enemies and your adversaries he will give them into your hand to use for the glory of him, of God. It says, number 10, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. Yeah, it grieved them. The whole army, like I say, he basically bringing an army with him. It grieved them because, they felt like they had control and do what they want to do. So, number 11, so I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. He was there 3 days. So, he said, told him it took about 3 days, I believe. He said, he was there 3 days. So, and then, verse 12, and I rose in the night and had some few men with me. Neither told I any man what God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode up on. So he arose in the night, while everybody else was sleeping. Joseph made a mistake. He told his brothers the dream of the vision that God had gave him. And they felt some type of way. And when he told them, they put him in the pit. They sold him off to slavery. They did all these type of things because everybody ain't happy for you. Everybody don't want to hear that your elevation. So they get jealous and that witchcraft spirit get on the inside of them and they want to see you fall down. They don't want to see you fulfill what God say fulfill. Who is you? What makes you better than? That type of thing. Because God didn't give them the vision. So they felt less than. Ain't no telling what they into or what they doing. Or, maybe there's a reason why God didn't give them. Or maybe that calling wasn't for them. Maybe they got a different calling that God hasn't given them because they doing their own thing. But you can't tell everybody. Joseph told everybody he ended up in the sold out to slavery, ended up in the pit, but God's word won't return to him void. God knew that Joseph was going to do that. So God already had some plans and he was strategic and he had some things set in place to where Joseph was brought from the pit to the palace. God's word won't return to him void. Whatever he said to you, it's going to come to pass. I don't care what kind of adversity or what kind of adversaries that you come up against. If he said it to you, it's going to come to pass. All we need to learn to do is keep our mouth closed so that we don't put more on us than we can bear in bringing it to pass. God told Rebecca that the second son was going to be greater than the first. And she went and did her own way to try to get, the rights and everything for Jacob from Esau and everything. And it was going to come to pass anyway. But sent him through a whole bunch of stuff. He was a trickster. And, him and his mama in cahoots, a whole bunch. His brother was going to kill him and all of that. You read it for yourself, Jacob and Esau. So when we learn to keep our mouth closed and just keep in constant communication with God, he'll tell us where to go. He'll tell us what to do. Scripture tells us don't go from the right to the left. He will lead and guide us where to go and what to do. We got to be in constant communication. We got to pray without ceasing to God in order to know what God wants us to do. In order to know to have God tell us what to do, which way to go. If not, we're going to say some things or do some things that's going to make us go around that mountain again. And it's going to prolong the things. Not saying it won't happen, but we can prolong our blessing. Some of us, we waiting on God to do something and still waiting. And we ain't realized that we've done some things that caused it to be prolonged. So sometimes we need to be quiet and just listen and wait on God. It say he got up out by the night by the gate. Wait. He took a few. He said, and I went out by the night by the gate of the valley while everybody else was sleeping, even before the dragon well, into the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem. He went and looked at, scoped it out himself. He went to go see the ruins and everything for himself, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. He went to go see exactly what they had said. He went to go see what he had to do. Then, verse 14, then I went unto the gate of the fountain into the king's pool, but there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. So he couldn't took the beast, the animal that he rode in on. Then I went up in the night by the brook and viewed the wall and turned back and entered the gate of the valley and so returned. So he went another way. Sometimes we think one way is the highway, but sometimes we give up. We got to learn to stop giving up and go a different route, a different way, which is basically what I've done, in my life with this last thing that happened. Don't take, I'm not supposed to maybe I wasn't supposed to go that way for a long time. Maybe it was just for a season or whatever. But we need to take what God gives us and the instruction that God gives us and be open-minded to maybe it's supposed to happen a different way. We got to stop having tunnel vision. We got to think outside the box sometimes. We got to make sure it's coming from God and not from our own heart or whatever. Verse 16, and the rulers knew not whither I went or what I did. Neither had I as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. Sometimes you got to get quiet. It's just you and God. You don't want to tell everybody because, when you start telling everybody something and then, they going to put their spin on it, they can also cause you to go around that mountain longer, than expected, than you're supposed to. So sometimes you just got to stay quiet and do what God say do. Move in silence. People be looking at you, be cordial. Or whatever, but sometimes you can't tell everybody your business, what you're doing. There's a time to be transparent, which y'all know I'm a transparent preacher. I don't have no problem telling you because I ain't got nothing to hide. I ain't trying to get over on people or do people wrong. I ain't trying to take money from people. I go out here and work and do mine and get mine for myself. I don't have to get it from everybody else or whatever. So I'm not trying to sit up and live off other people and, be a burden to other people. So I'm very, very transparent. But there are times where God say, be quiet. Get quiet. I need you to be quiet. I don't need you to tell people or expose what we about to do. Because some people, if you give them a heads up, they'll come unglued. There was this meeting I went to. I was talking to somebody the other day. And because it was twice it happened. Because a heads up was given, this individual come unglued. And everybody was shocked. And because you shouldn't have gave him a heads up or whatever. But there are sometimes you just need to move in silence. Because if people think you are going to do something that's going to come against them, there are some people that can't handle confrontation. They don't want confrontation. So they will do any and everything they can to divert from it, to stay away from it. But when you give a heads up that something is about to take place, instantly anxiety rises up in them because they don't like to be confronted. They don't feel comfortable in confrontation. And usually this is people that are full of lies because they don't have nothing that they can stand on. They can't stand on truth. They done told so many lies. They don't know what's about to happen. They don't know which way you going to go with this or whatever. So they cause a scene to make it all about your fault. So, and when they do that, then it, like I say, they always make it all about you, and then they make their exit. They, while you sitting there, it never gets done, actually. Whatever that thing that you gave a heads up about never really gets done, because they make their way of escape because they can't handle it. They sit in a pool of lies, and they know not one of those lies can back them up. So that's how they do. So that's why I'm very, very transparent. I always have truth to back me up. I can pull something from somewhere. I always got something with me. I have my I's dotted and my T's crossed because I walk in truth. You're not going to, I'm one of those ones that can handle confrontation because I have everything I need before me. I'm not running around here trying to live a lie or be something that I'm not, or try to be over or extra or more than. When you look at Dr. Bell, you get Dr. Bell. This is what you get. So I'm like that. And people don't like to be in confrontation with me because they know I got my proof. They know I got my truth. They know everything. So they make a shift. They all this confusion, the devil is all in confusion. All this confusion takes place and goes, before everything. And then before you know it, they done made a way of escape. They ain't even there no more. They gone. You don't hear from them, nothing. Because they can't take confrontation. When you are a liar, you don't want to be in the middle of nothing. Because your lies can't even hold you. So, that's why I say you don't give the enemy a heads up. Because if you tell it, they instantly gonna get prepared. That anxiety gonna raise up, and they mind, them racing thoughts gonna start going in their head. I'm mental health, I know. Them racing thoughts gonna start going in their head. The blood is gonna start running the way they even hear ringing in their ears. They just gonna be so flustered, and they gonna want to get. All they want to do is get out, to get away, make a way to get out. That's all they want to do. They trying to put blame on you, trying to make everything on you, so you can stay off of them, and before you know it, you see the door closing behind them. That's how people are. That's how liars are, because they can't handle the truth. They don't, they always got to be out the way. They don't want to be in the middle of nothing. They start a whole bunch of stuff, but when the rubber meets the road, they don't want to be in the middle of it. So sometimes you got to learn to get quiet. Move in silence. Even in the army, my grandfather was in the army, sitting listening to some of his stories. Sometimes you got to get down on the ground and you got to creep. You got to get quiet. You not be so out there to be seen. And then when the thing comes to fruition that God told you, that he gave you, or the thing that he wants you to do, then people like, where'd that come from? It's because you was quiet. When you get quiet, you have less adversaries to face. You have, you creeping. You ain't got so much. But if you want to tell everybody what you're doing, you got all this adversity coming to you to, stop it. So you just get quiet. So like I say, I've been quiet for a few months now. I'm going to say more, a few weeks now. And got some things in place. And, everyone, where you been? Where you go? I've got people coming to me saying, what's going this? What's this? What you doing? Whatever. And, I'm okay. You just tell people what, just a little bit, be cordial. But you don't tell everybody everything, especially when you're scoping something out and when you're seeing something taking place. You don't want to expose the enemy before time. I learned that, studying a lot of forensics and, psychology and stuff. You learn how to be observant and you watch. You don't want to give the enemy the idea that you own to them. And then, because once they find out, they gone. They doing something else. Like a sting operation. You just watch and you go through. You don't want to give the enemy, or let's say you're working with the cartel, you won't tell the cartel that you the snitch or you the one, or you working with the popo or whatever. It's like that. Sometimes you got to get quiet and just move in silence. And then, like I say, before they know it, it done manifested, then you can be transparent again because God done gave it to you. He done did what he said he gonna do. So, yeah, he, like I say, he went and you got to be quiet. He didn't tell nobody, not even the priests or the nobles, not even his people around him. Verse 17 says, then I said unto them, ye see the distress that we are in? Now he talking to them. After he done went and spied out the land. After he done went and seen exactly what he got to go through or what's before him. He say, ye see the distress that we are in? How Jerusalem lieth waste and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. Now he done put out there the instruction that God gave him. He done finally told them why he there, why he's really there, what he's doing. And he told them after he's, scoped it out for himself. Verse 18, then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me. And also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. So after he told them that God got his stamp on it, that God, this was the blessing of God, the instructions of God told him to do. And he said he even got the king's stamp up on it, all the letters, and sent the help, the army, the people to hold back the adversaries or whatever. They were strengthened because not only did he come with talk, he came with evidence. He came with, the king's stamp, God's stamp, and the king sent, his entourage. Be careful of these people that's always saying they got this, that, and the other. They're going to do this, that, and then they ain't got no backing, no credentials, nothing to do, nothing that they said they going to do. But see, you hear them whispering over here to somebody that do know how to do it, and they want to pull on them to get it done. They want the accolades and the credit behind it, but they pulling on somebody else to do the work. Be careful of those, because they just want to, build a wonder, but they ain't sat down 5 minutes to learn or educate themselves on anything. But they want to pull on the smart people. They want to run around here and control the smart people. They want to tell people what to do and, how they want it or whatever. Don't serve man, serve God. I tell people that all the time. I'm not going to be pimped. I'm not going to serve man. I'm going to serve God. If I can't do what thus saith the Lord and what he said, his vision, I am not serving no person, no human, because that human don't have no heaven or hell to put me in. I will walk away. Just that simple. It's not all that about that for me. I don't need no soapbox. I got YouTube. I don't need all that. I don't need nobody's offering plate. I got my own check. I work and pay for, God blesses me through these hands. He blesses me. I don't need to run around and carry somebody else's bag. I really don't. So be careful of those that want to pull on you to build them up, but treat you like mess. They treat you in a way that it brings reproach. Like they slave. Like it's all about them. They just want to pimp you. They just want to use you to glorify them. No, if you glorifying them, it ain't getting past God. It's not glorifying God. It's glorifying them. They have their place. They on their way to hell is where they on their way to. And I find joy in that because that's what they want to do. That's their free will. Now, if they repent and God take them into glory, I'm going to find joy in that too. But I don't have to deal with them while they're going to hell on their own. I really don't. You're not going to mistreat me. You're not going to try to control me. You're not going to try to do none of that. I'm going to do what thus saith the Lord. Because thus saith the Lord is what's taking care of this. My bills. My keeping me in everything. So, I'm sorry. I'm not one of those ones that's going to settle for what man do. But I will settle for what God do. Just be mindful of those that's trying to build their own self, but they ain't got the time, the patience, or the cognitive deficits to study and learn for themselves. They can go to the same school you went to. They can get the same degrees that you went to. Why are you going to sit there and let somebody control you to get the benefit? And if they throw you anything, it's crumbs. When God can give it all. Don't serve nobody. Serve God. That's what you do with that. Serve God. But when Sanballat the Hornite and the Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn. They didn't believe and despised us and said, "What is this thing ye do? Will ye rebel against the king?" He telling them, you going to rebel against the king. You ain't doing this. And he got his papers and everything. He got the stamp that the king is with this. But maybe the king didn't know everything. Maybe, the king was a little tipsy. He was feeling good with the wine and everything, sitting there with his wife, enjoying life. So he asked them, what you going to laugh? You going to go against the king? What you doing? Verse 20 says, Then I answered them and said unto them, The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build. But ye have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. You can go on and say what you're going to say. Do what you're going to do. Laugh the way you want to live. But see, God of heaven, God supplies all my needs. God got his stamp on this. God is going to prosper us. We are doing the will of our Father. We're doing what God going to do. So when people laugh at you in your face about what you can and can't do, and you just going on with God, you tell them God going to prosper you. God gave you the word. He gave you the instruction, and God prepares the way. So you go on to do what God say do and leave them behind to do whatever it is they want done themselves. I hope y'all got a blessing out of this today. Like I say, be strategic. You got to learn to speak when it's time, and then you got to learn to be quiet. When God is instructing you to do certain things, because the more that you speak, the more you tell the enemy, the adversary of your plans. And while you telling the enemy, you'll find the ones that are not with you. They don't want you to prosper. They always putting roadblocks and stumbling blocks in your way. When you want to find out who's in your corner, go just start saying what God say. Tell them what God gonna do. The instruction that God gave. You're gonna see people rise up that don't want you to see you succeed. They don't want you to prosper. They jealous. Maybe they done spent their life doing nothing, and they hear you come along and everything looking at you, you blessed and highly favored. They want to be a stumbling block to you. So, like I say, start talking. It'll always expose those that's against you. But you got to be paying attention. You got to listen. Because it ain't going to come out looking like the enemy. The devil was in the Garden of Eden looking like a serpent. Looking like he belonged. And he went from a serpent in the Garden of Eden in Genesis to a dragon in the book of Revelation. So he develops, he metamorphosizes, or whatever you want to call it, too. The enemy is usually in the one that looks comfortable to you. The one that looks like they belong. Your best friend. The one that's close to you. The one that, they look like they're in your corner. But behind your back, they really don't want nothing to do with you. They just trying to get rid of you. So pay attention to those that's around you. Be particular. Be strategic about who you speak to. Because like I say, everybody ain't in your corner. What we learned from Nehemiah today is, when we get our instruction from God, like I say, we have a communication. We have to have a relationship with God, conversation with God. We got to pray without ceasing. We got to constantly hear from God. And when we get our word from God, our instruction from God, then we got to be strategic. You can't give everybody the word from God. Because, see, everybody don't believe. You got some that say they believe, But in their behavior, you can tell they don't believe because it goes against what they say. So the heart of a person is shown through their behavior. So if they say they believe God, but they acting like the enemy, who you gonna believe? What you gonna believe? But anyway, like I said, I hope this blessed your soul this Saturday. Happy Shabbat again. I'm getting ready to go out here and finish doing what I need to do so that I can be refreshed to go. I got to go handle some business. Tomorrow I got to go show up and show out. People been asking about me, and I got to go make an appearance or whatever to take care of some business. All right. Y'all stay blessed.